there, I'm meteorologist Amy Wilmoth with Elizabeth Gardner, just getting done with this round of winter weather that we had over the weekend. We're still dealing with some of the impacts of that, which you can see on our Apex camera here. It's just going to take some time, right, for all of this to melt.
It is, yeah. So this was a pretty interesting setup. You know, we started watching this, about this time last week. And, initially the models were showing a whole lot of snow, but the models tend to always bias that way. And we knew as it got closer, we would have a much better idea. I mean, it took a pretty good while for the storm to form. And so, for several days, we were talking about a storm that hadn't even formed yet. And the models have a harder time with a storm that hasn't formed yet. So it was really interesting to watch this and, then at the end be down to, the wintry mix that we saw.
Yeah. Some of the snow and sleet reports, I know you and Chris put these together. These are some of the heavier amounts that we saw. So Red Oak over 2 inches, Cary over an inch and a half in Wake Forest. And we were explaining to our viewers that sleet is it's more dense, and so it takes a while for it to melt. It can be harder to shovel, things like that. And with the Arctic air coming in tonight, anything that melts today, which we will have melting today, it will freeze again tonight. So I think we'll have to just deal with this for a little bit. And we had, some pretty decent ice totals as well.
Yeah, we did. And, we were so lucky actually to have the sleet. It's kind of a double-edged sword. The problem with the sleet is it makes the driving harder. And so, of course, over the day yesterday and again last night, we had a lot of places, especially around the triangle, where the roads were covered in sleet, and it made the driving a lot trickier. But it also kept a lot of people from having power outages. When you have that freezing rain, it's a raindrop and it hits the branches or the power lines and creates this glaze, and it adds up, and it just gets so heavy that it breaks them. And so we were pretty fortunate for most of the viewing area. There were some spots, especially south of the triangle and then northwest of the triangle, where we had some power outages, but they were fairly minor. They were a few hundred for each county versus, oh my goodness, Amy, have you seen the pictures from Nashville?
Well, Grant Skinner, one of the meteorologists, has family there, and he was showing me photos, and everyone here needs to be thankful that that didn't happen.
Yeah, because we really thought that might happen. Yeah. As this was getting closer, it looked like, one of the models was trying at the very end to say, hey, it may be more sleet. And, it had been, freezing rain. And a lot of times the models will throw you something, in one, or two runs of the models, and it doesn't happen. So that's kind of where, we just have to make our best, informed guess about how it's going to go. But we're super lucky to have the sleet. And so, Amy, I think you were talking about the fact that, it is thick out there. It's really, really wet too right now. It was a little drier and fluffier yesterday, but we're warming up, and so it has a lot of water content. But it's important to go ahead and shovel it if you can, because like Amy said, it's going to freeze and be a lot harder to deal with tomorrow.
And I was just thinking, for whatever reason, my neighborhood is an older neighborhood, older individuals, and so if I see one of my neighbors out there trying to get rid of some of this heavy stuff, I'm going to go out and try and help them, or maybe send my husband out to try to help them. So just help your neighbors if they're elderly, especially. We don't want them out there doing some of this backbreaking work that we're going to have to deal with, because you don't want to deal with it when it refreezes again overnight tonight. It takes a little bit longer to melt as well. And also, Chris was talking about this on TV. If you can, clear off the roof of your car. I know that can be hard for some of you that have those bigger SUVs, but that is going to end up sliding off the back of your car, and it could hit someone else's car and cause damage. And, it could cause an accident. So try to do that if you can. That's definitely a good idea. And one more thing we wanted to mention, just a quick little teaser here for the weekend.
Yes.
We've been watching the models.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, we don't really know exactly what's going to happen, but we're in the 5 to 7 day range, and it's trending up that we could see a little bit of something. What that's going to be, we're not sure, but we're watching the trends, maybe a little bit of snow.
Yeah, so it kind of reminds me of what we were seeing this time last week, where the pattern was showing snow. But there's so many elements that have to come together. We have to have cold air in place. We have to have moisture coming from the right direction. And right now it looks like it is, but so many things can change. Like we were talking about earlier, the pattern has to be just right. This is a system that hasn't formed yet. And depending on where the low tracks will depend on whether we get nothing at all or we get snow, or we get a wintry mix. And equal chances of all of those right now. So Amy, I pulled up my my iPhone weather app just to look at it, which I never do. And I looked at it, and sure enough, there's 5 to 7 inches on Saturday. This may be the first you're hearing about this, but we really encourage you to just download the WRAL weather app, because it's our forecast. All of us here work on the forecast. It's the same information. It's the same forecast that you're going to see on TV and on all of our platforms. And we're not going to jump the gun to be first and then be wrong. We would rather be right as we can with the information that we have instead of being first, because it doesn't help anybody to say, hey, we're going to have 5 to 7 inches of snow, and then we have to backtrack and say, oh no, that's not what we're going to see, and to get people to understand the changes and why is so hard. So that's why we don't put it out there. This is why we have this, right now we're looking at trends. By 3 to 5 days, we'll start to look at the timing and what precip types will be. And then, 24, 48 hours out, we'll start giving you some numbers when we feel more comfortable.
Yep. We're watching every model that comes in, so stay tuned.